to our special show, Stars and Strikes. In the next half hour, we'll talk about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States of America, the historical past of relations between the two countries, but more importantly, the substance of his meeting with President Biden. Trade, connectivity, security, COVID-19, climate change. All aspects were discussed, but focus on how to take forward the strategic partnership between the two countries.
A handshake and a warm embrace. It took Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Joe Biden a little time to warm up to each other. But soon, jokes and laughs followed.
The whole purpose of this meeting is for him to help me figure out.
And after the pleasantries, the two leaders, who were meeting for the first time since Biden took office, got down to business. Speaking first, President Biden invoked the Mahatma and his message of peace.
As the world celebrates Mahatma Gandhi's birthday next week, we're all reminded that his message of non-violence, respect, tolerance matters today maybe more than it ever has.
The US President spoke at length on strengthening the Indo-US relationship further and recounted how he had predicted the friendship way back in 2006.
I think that the relationship between India and the United States, the largest democracies in the world, is destined to be stronger, closer, and tighter, and I think it can benefit the whole world. In fact, back in 2006, I set that hope out, where I said that by 2020, when I was Vice President, 2020, India and the United States would be among the closest nations in the world.
The US President emphasized on climate change and the effects of the pandemic. Indo-Pacific was a big focal point.
Prime Minister and I were going to be talking today about what more we can do to fight COVID-19, take on the climate challenges that the world face, and ensure stability in Indo-Pacific, including with our own Quad partners.
Prime Minister Modi too cited Mahatma's teachings while touching upon climate change, the biggest challenge in the years to come.
ये दशक उस ट्रस्टीशिप के लिए भी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है। महात्मा गांधी हमेशा इस बात की वकालत करते थे कि प्लेनेट के हम ट्रस्टी हैं और हमने हमारी आने वाली पीढ़ियों को एक ट्रस्टी के रूप में ये प्लेनेट को हमने सुपुर्द करना होगा और ये ट्रस्टीशिप की भावना भी भारत और अमेरिका के बीच के संबंधों में एक बहुत अहमियत रखेगा।
The Prime Minister remarked that under Biden, seeds for a stronger relationship have been sown.
जब भारत और अमेरिका के संबंधों में मैं ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव देख रहा हूं, तब मैं देख रहा हूं कि ट्रेडिशन, लोकतांत्रिक परंपराओं और मूल्यों को लेकर के जो हम जी रहे हैं और जिसके प्रति हम समर्पित हैं, हम कमिटेड हैं, वो ट्रेडिशन का अपना एक महात्मा और अधिक बढ़ेगा।
The Taliban takeover of Afghanistan was without a doubt a key subject of the bilateral meet. Both leaders called upon the Taliban to adhere to its commitment to ensure that Afghanistan is not used for terrorism against any country.
The two sides underscored the importance of combating terrorism in Afghanistan. They called on the Taliban to adhere to these and all of its commitments under Resolution 2593. That includes obviously the issue of, as I said, ensuring that Afghan territory is not used to threaten or attack any countries, to shelter or train terrorist groups, to plan or finance terrorist attacks.
The meet had several lighter moments as the leaders walked down memory lane a bit.
When I was elected as a 29-year-old kid in 1972, before I was sworn in, I got a letter from a person named Biden, last name, in Mumbai, from Mumbai. The next morning I had a press conference going away, and the Indian press said, someone spoke up, you have 5 Bidens in India.
To that, Prime Minister Modi had a repartee ready.
आपने भारत में बाइडेन सरनेम के लोगों के सामने बड़ा डिटेल में जिक्र किया। आपने मेरे साथ भी इस बात का उल्लेख किया था। तो बाद में मैंने काफ़ी कुछ कागजात खोजने की कोशिश की है। कागजात में लेकर के भी आया हूँ। हो सकता है शायद उसमें से कुछ आगे का निकल आए, शायद आपको कुछ काम आए।
And today I have brought along some documents. Maybe we'll be able to take this matter forward, and maybe those documents could be of use to you.
Are we related?
Yes.
The first meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Biden has set the foundation for even more closer strategic ties. Faced with an expansionist China, the two countries, the world's largest democracies, will be engaging at various levels, from trade to defense, to protect their interests.
From the very first visit by independent India's Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump's bonhomie in Howdy Modi, Indo-US ties have seen a lot of ups and downs over the years. In the next report, we'll tell you all about the trajectory of ties between India and the United States of America and how relations evolved over the years.
Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister of India and the Orient's greatest political and spiritual leader, flies to Washington on one of the most important state visits of recent years.
1949, the first visit by newly independent India's Prime Minister to the United States. Prime Minister Nehru and President Truman, the world's oldest democracy and the youngest democracy, in an embrace of infinite possibilities. But things didn't begin well. And in a world with deep post-war divisions, Nehru's policy of non-alignment and neutrality kept America at arm's length. A decade later, independent India hosted the first visit by a US president. President Dwight Eisenhower and Prime Minister Nehru strengthened a flagging relationship. But Nehru's policy of non-alignment would stand firm and keep India away from forging any substantial India-US relationship. Things improved dramatically in the years that followed with a young, new generation president in the White House. In 1962, the John F. Kennedy administration openly supported India during the 1962 Sino-Indian War and considered Chinese action as blatant Chinese communist aggression against India, support that provided great hope of a burgeoning friendship.
We are in touch with the Indian government to determine their assessment of it. In order to better assess Indian needs, we are sending a team to New Delhi.
But the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963 would bring that momentum to a grinding halt and foretold a sudden slide in relations. The next president in the White House, Lyndon Johnson, wasn't a big fan of India and did much to reverse all the gains his predecessors had made. President Johnson, while maintaining ties with India, began America's relationship with Pakistan, not only to ease tensions with China, but also to contain India's rise. Pakistan would flaunt American military hardware in the 1965 war with India, with tanks and fighter aircraft proving to have an edge over India's own, even though Pakistan was still ultimately defeated and contained. But nose-diving relations between Delhi and Washington would hit rock bottom only when the next US president arrived. Taking his predecessor's Pakistan friendliness and bolstering it with massive military aid, President Richard Nixon fully pushed India into the proverbial arms of the Soviet Union in the middle of the Cold War. The cold, frosty Nixon-Indira Gandhi relationship would soon enter the realms of national security. In 1971, when Indira Gandhi's India mounted a ferocious campaign to liberate East Pakistan, President Nixon sent the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier to the Bay of Bengal to intimidate India, a ploy that didn't work, the war ending in a blistering military defeat for Pakistan and the birth of Bangladesh. India's first nuclear tests in 1974 were frowned upon by President Nixon. But with no real relations, there were no sanctions to be applied on India. Following India's emergency, two new national leaders, Prime Minister Morarji Desai and President Jimmy Carter, would gradually attempt to rescue relations between the two countries. Even though India did not support the US invasion of Afghanistan by the turn of the decade.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and Mrs. Reagan.
But it was the next US President, Ronald Reagan, who pushed the button on a slew of military supply programs for India, including help with the newborn Light Combat Aircraft project. Through the turbulent 80s, the Reagan administration and India, under Indira and then her son Rajiv Gandhi, would continue to build on ties, ever aware of how fragile they had proven to be in the past.
Good afternoon.
The Bill Clinton P.V. Narasimha Rao years are seen by contemporary historians as a time of missed opportunities and contradictory policies. In the early 90s, India had just flipped the difficult switch on economic liberalization, but was also dealing with the beginnings of militancy and Pakistan-sponsored terrorism in Kashmir. The restoration of American aid to Pakistan in 1995 by President Clinton would give India the impetus it needed to go the distance in its nuclear ambitions. Three years later, here in the wastelands of Pokhran, Rajasthan, a bomb was literally dropped on India-US relations.
Today, at 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran range. These tests conducted today were with a fission device, a low-yield device, and a thermonuclear device.
India's arrival on the nuclear stage in 1998 under Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee triggered an instantaneous reaction from Washington. President Clinton instantly ordered sanctions against India, cutting off all military and economic aid and freezing loans by American banks to the Indian public sector. All the good work done under the Reagan administration in the 80s came to an end. But the sanctions turned out to be a dud and did nothing to stop India's economic rise. In 2000, by the turn of the millennium, when President Clinton visited India after the Kargil War, it was seen as the beginning of a renewed, tentative friendship.
This is terrorist.
But it was the following administration in Washington under President George W. Bush, in the weeks and months after the 9/11 terror attacks, that truly pushed a partnership with India.
Mr. Prime Minister, welcome to the United States.
Centered around the common enemy of Islamic fundamentalism and terrorism, India and the United States forged a strategic partnership that became the seed from which everything would grow going forward, including everything you see today.
Of India's complete support in this.
Things were finally moving forward strategically and at a steady clip. In 2002-2003, India and the US would hold their first Malabar naval exercise, a military drill that has become the centerpiece of today's Quad partnership. Gone were the inhibitions of the past. With a track record of suspicion and hostile policy action, the two nations were ready to embrace for real. That new relationship enshrined in the 2008 India-US Civil Nuclear Agreement, which Manmohan Singh staked his very prime ministership on. There would be no looking back. Under President George W. Bush, and then under President Obama, the Manmohan Singh administration would open the gates to huge military armament supplies from the United States, with deals for transport aircraft, maritime surveillance jets, missiles, combat helicopters, and much else. In 2007, the Quad or the Quadrilateral Strategic Dialogue would take birth. A strategic partnership between the United States, India, Japan and Australia. But it would take another 10 years for it to fully take form. Meanwhile, the India-US weapons deals were sweetening the pipeline and paving the way for the first truly interpersonal relationship between an Indian Prime Minister and a US President. First, this hug in Washington, and then this hug in India. Entwined in these warm gestures was the fact that a Prime Minister who had earlier been blocked for entry by the United States was now a favoured friend and an ally in the region. And but for a few bristling comments over the years on the topic of discrimination and unity, Modi and Obama held the alliance together in strong hands, pushing it across the realms of trade, strategic affairs and culture. But if Modi and Obama exuded the Jhappiwala warmth, the next relationship would explode in terms of camaraderie and body language. Famously, the Howdy Modi event in Houston in 2019, when Modi and President Donald Trump would take what looked like victory laps in front of a hysterical diaspora crowd. Another viral moment was this one, when the bonhomie spilt over at the G7 summit in France. And finally, right before the COVID-19 pandemic would change the world forever, the massive Namaste Trump event at the Motera Stadium in Gujarat in 2020, where the two leaders emblazoned their friendship in the consciousness of history books. And finally now, in a world that has changed dramatically in the last 18 months, stand the leaders of the two countries once again. From the COVID pandemic, to the rise of ISIS, to the collapse of Afghanistan. In their hands are the aspirations, safety and prosperity of billions, and literally peace in this new world we've inherited.
Welcome back to a special show, Stars and Strikes. The Indian Prime Minister's each visit to the United States of America since he assumed office in 2014 was not just political or diplomatic. He used each opportunity to meet with the Indian diaspora and engage top business honchos to take further the vision of India.
4 months after the 2014 landslide victory at the Lok Sabha polls, Narendra Damodar Das arrived at Uncle Sam's doorstep. The United States of America had till then refused a visa to the Chief Minister of Gujarat. But then, when the same person arrived as the Prime Minister of India, the US laid out a red carpet welcome. The combined hearts of the Indian diaspora seemed to burst with pride. At the Madison Square event, the politician Prime Minister dazzled like a genuine rock star, and the crowds swooned at his every move.
Prime Minister of the Republic of India.
After Madison Square, the Prime Minister enthralled surging crowds at the New York Central Park. Standing next to Hollywood star Hugh Jackman at the Global Citizen Festival, he connected with the youth with the line that till then had been synonymous only with the Star Wars movies.
May the Force be with you.
And the newly minted Prime Minister of India had breakfast with the CEOs of global enterprises. Over a series of one-on-one meetings, Modi met the top bosses of financial biggies and made time to catch up with India-born corporate leaders based in the US. He invited investment from prominent CEOs and urged the Indian American community to take up a greater role in the development of India. The first 4-day trip to the USA was blitzkrieg in nature and impressive enough to change his image for years to come as the man who was going to build New India. Exactly a year later, the Prime Minister of India was back to reconnect and revive the ties made earlier. This time, he had 24 hours more to work on. The Prime Minister had a working dinner in which major Fortune 500 companies were present to deliberate on investment opportunities in India. Prime Minister Modi visited the West Coast, the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister after almost 33 years. Considered the home of startups, innovation and technology. He took part in town hall Q&A at the Facebook headquarters along with its CEO Mark Zuckerberg.
मैं बहुत गरीब परिवार से हूँ। आप जानते हैं मैं रेलवे स्टेशन पे चाय बेचता था। हमारे पिताजी तो रहे नहीं हैं। माता जी है, 90 साल से भी ज़्यादा उम्र है। आज भी अपने सारे काम खुद करती हैं।
Prime Minister Modi also addressed a renewable energy roundtable at Stanford University. And then he interacted with the Indian community in San Jose. 6 months later, in his quick 2-day trip to US, the Prime Minister made time to catch up with scientists from the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory. 3 months after that, came another 3-day trip in June 2016, when Prime Minister Modi addressed the 40th AGM of the US-India Business Council and met US business leaders. He exchanged views with US think tanks and attended a ceremony marking the return of Indian antiques. He laid wreaths at the tomb of the unknown soldier. He also laid a wreath at the Space Shuttle Columbia Memorial linked to the memory of Indian origin astronaut Kalpana Chawla. It would be another year before the Prime Minister of India would be back on US shores. The White House by this time had a new occupant. While building a long-lasting bromance with President Donald Trump, Prime Minister Modi never forgot to connect with business community and the Indian diaspora. He met top American CEOs of global giants, including Apple, Microsoft, and Google, on issues ranging from visas, investment, and job creation, occupying the center stage. The next time Narendra Modi was to land at an US airport, it was to be as a second-term Prime Minister, representing the largest democracy in the world. The year was 2019, and Narendra Modi had just led BJP to yet another historic victory in the Lok Sabha elections. Flush with the victory that had given him a resounding mandate. Prime Minister Modi resumed his US outreach with the iconic Howdy Modi event at Houston's NRG Stadium. The President of USA, Donald Trump, joined him in an unparalleled show of bromance. The Prime Minister of India replied with,
अब की बार ट्रम्प सरकार. Thank you.
And a victory lap with Trump at the last leg of the marquee event, with the diaspora growing hoarse, cheering for their favorite son of the soil. On the heels of the successful Howdy Modi event, the Prime Minister of India addressed the opening plenary of the Bloomberg Global Business Forum in New York. In each of his visits to the US, Prime Minister Modi has sought to impart new energy in the bilateral relationship between the US and India. He connected with the business community and the Indian diaspora. And he presented India defined by the contours of his own vision of a land brimming with opportunity, a nation that could be a reliable business partner, and a country that was friendly to the United States and all the businesses that it stood for.
That's all we have time for in this special edition of Stars and Strikes. News and updates do continue on the other side of a short break. Stay tuned to India Today.